Hey, this is Chris Crawford with Chris Crawford Knives. I want to show you a new grinding jig that I made. This is based off of Stan Moise's design. I hope I'm saying that right. He's BrnoBorn on Instagram. Now, what I've been using in the past was this grinding jig where you have a set screw and it changes the angle, and basically you put your blade in there and you set the angle and then you keep adjusting the screw so that your grind comes from your edge all the way to the spine. But this is a grinding jig that works a little bit on a different principle, and so I've tried it out on a couple of test blades. I like the way it worked. I've got an actual blade that's going into an actual knife, and so we're going to try it on this. I'm going to film it, and then maybe I'll either ruin this blade or it'll come out great. And so we're gonna see how it goes. Now I'll be doing flat grinding. All the things I'm telling you apply to flat grinding. Stan does everything hollow grinding, and so there's a little bit of something different when it comes to hollow grinding than flat grinding, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. So the first thing I want to do is show you this up close, and we'll take a look at how it's made, or what the parts are. So this is the grinding jig right here. It's basically 2 aluminum blocks, and I put the blocks together. I drilled holes through the blocks so I could put these set pins in. Once I had the set pins in, everything, pulled it together tight in a vise, and I milled all the sides so that everything would be parallel. Then I drilled some outer holes that I could put these bolts through, and you can see they're tapped on this end. And so that's how I can tighten down. The blade sits in just like this, and it tightens down on it. There are some inserts, some micarta inserts, and that protects both the blade but also the aluminum. And then also on the outside I have these hardened steel face plates, and I did it on both sides. Basically these are for when the blade's in there. If I'm grinding, I can bump the belt up against it and cut very clean plunge lines. So next let's take a look at how the blade's held in the jig. As I mentioned before, the blade is held in place between these 2 micarta spacers, these micarta inserts. And one thing that you want to do is also insert something in the other end. Now the reason I put these steel plates and everything on both sides is because theoretically I could put 2 blades in there and grind one, turn around, grind the other. But I'm just putting my spring in there since I know it's the same size because I surface ground these together. And then we'll tighten down these bolts to secure everything. Now before I've secured everything too tight, I want to make sure that my cutting edge, because I'm grinding this cutting edge at the top, is parallel with my table, or it's parallel really to the bottom of the jig. And so the best way I found to do that is to flip the jig upside down. Then I have a little angle finder that I can put on there, and then I'm going to zero it out, and then I'm going to turn the jig back over and put it on my blade. And so I'm trying to hold it as close to the jig as I can, and I can see that I'm a little high. I guess I'm going the wrong way with it. Okay, so I keep adjusting this until I get everything to zero out, and then I'll lock it into place. Now this is where the real beauty of this grinding jig comes in. If you don't want to do math, you can use the grinding jig anyway, but this is where I see its real benefit. So my blade thickness is 0.104. I want to end up with an edge that's 0.020. That's inches, so 20,000ths of an inch. If I subtract that, I get 0.084. Divide that by 2, I get 0.042. So this is how much I need to take off the edge on both sides to get to 0.208. Now on my blade, if I measure from the edge all the way up to however far I want to grind, in this case all the way to the top, I get 0.650. Now if you wanted to grind a little bit lower, maybe you didn't want to grind that high, just measure from the edge to however high you want to grind, and that will be the value that you use right here. So next we take those values and we go to an online triangle calculator, and it allows you to put in angles and lengths. And so in this online calculator, we're going to put a 90 at this top angle, and then we're going to put a length of 0.042 from here. We're going to put a length of 0.650 from right here. Tell it to calculate, and it'll give a little graph, and it's showing a representation. And so we have our 90-degree angle here. We have 0.042 height that we want to take off of both sides, and then we have 0.650, which is the distance that we want to grind, and calculate that, and we come out with 3.697. or rounded up to 3.7. And since my little angle finder only calculates to the tenths, this is the value that I want right here. Now, theoretically, if I set my work rest to 3.7 degrees, then I should be able to grind those bevels perfectly. It should be the perfect angle for the grind. And when I talk about setting the angle of the table, we're going to set the angle relative to the platen. So we want to use our angle finder and get the angle of the platen and then zero it out. And when we put this on the table, it's not going to be zero, but it's going to be from 90 degrees. And so we can see there that we're at 89.7. And so what we want to do is take our 3.7 degrees and subtract that from 90, which comes up to 86.7. And that's going to give us the angle that this table should be. So let's see if we can raise this up to 86.7. Okay, it's pretty close, 86.5. And I'll keep fooling with this off camera. The reason is when I tighten these bolts up right here, it's going to adjust it a little bit, so I'll have to go back and forth a little bit. But I'll keep working on that until I get the angle of 86.7. All right, I've got an 80 grit belt on here, and I'm ready to grind the bevels into my blade. I have it edge side up. In the vise, I have the table set to the 3.7 degrees. And one thing that I didn't mention is you have to have a table that overhangs, because this grinding jig is going to overhang as you bring the blade into the belt. And so I use a push stick to push it in, because if you don't, it's very hard to control this way. So with one hand I'll pull, with the other hand I'll push it in. I'll make a couple of passes, then I'll turn it around and go over to this side, and I'll make a couple of passes that way. When I come to this side, I'm going to readjust the belt a little bit because it's overhanging. I'm going to want it to be flush, but each time I'll just go back and forth, and I'll keep working it until it works all the way up my blade. And theoretically, when I get to the top up here, I should have a 20 thousandths edge. So here's the blade after I finished grinding it. Turned out okay, but I did have some issues. Like anything that's new, there's a learning curve involved, and I'm definitely going to have to learn to use this jig. I like everything about it. I like the idea behind it. I just got to get better at the execution. So I got a really clean grind line right there. I went a little higher than I like to. I like it better like this, where it kind of rounds off. However, they don't exactly line up. The reason for that is, I adjusted my belt where it's level, flat, against the edge of the platen. Ground one side, flipped it over, adjusted my belt on that side, grind, flipped it over. Did not adjust my belt, forgot to, and it overran my plunge line. And so it ended up cleaning up pretty good. I could put a chole in there and it might not be that obvious, but pretty much this blade's toast. But all in all, I think the grinding jig works great, and I'm looking forward to learning to use it better.